what you want, all right? Yeah, I'm here to help you.
Help yourself, fucker!
Alright, so by the intro of the video and the title, you know what the video is going to be about. So let's talk about it. Why do modern horror remakes fail? When I say fail, I don't exactly mean at the box office because, let's be honest here, so long as the producers are stuffing their pockets, we'll keep getting these movies. I'm talking about in terms of reception from the fans and critics. If there's one general principle on what makes or breaks a horror remake, it's this. How well does it include the original content? How good is it going to build upon or represent the original story and characters it was based upon? The critical mistake that producers and directors make with source material is they try to retell the original, but are unable to incorporate new elements well, or add new depth to previously established characters. So in this video, to see why the horror remakes fail, we need to assess the individual films. So with that being said, we're going to focus on the film franchises that got a reboot in the mid to late 2000s. Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. After first watching this movie upon its release, I gotta admit, I liked it. The modern aesthetic, the ramped up brutality, and the second half of the movie is pretty faithful to the original, even trying to include or reimagine iconic shots from Carpenter's Halloween. Despite those positives though, the problem is the first half of the movie. While they flesh out the relationship between Michael Myers and Dr. Loomis very well, giving Michael Myers more backstory makes the mistake of humanizing him and making him less imposing. Putting the young Michael Myers in a lewd, grungy, white trash background doesn't make him more unique or special like the original counterpart. And you're supposed to feel bad when he turns the characters inside out, but all you can do is nod in agreement when they get what they had coming to them. Even kidnapping Laurie to explain their connection minimizes him even more. So looking back on it now, the initial positive reception for the movie is most likely based on the fact that it followed right after the bullshit that was Halloween Resurrection.
Trick or treat, motherfucker!
Long story short, the remake fails because it diverts so far from the original telling of its most important character. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 was the only sequel made from this era of franchise reboots. And while the main story of Zombie's Halloween stays pretty close to the original, this sequel comes nowhere close to Carpenter's original sequel. The movie focuses on the fractured psyche of Laurie and Michael Myers following the events of the previous film, and as it turns out is a major misstep for Laurie's character because she doesn't have any of the strong traits aligned with the character in the initial series. She doesn't have any character development or story arc, spending much of the feature lashing out at people who are there to help her, which is made only worse when she goes crazy at the end of the movie. With all that considered, she's not the most mishandled character. And who was that, you ask? While Loomis is not the most important character in the series, he's an important character nonetheless. And this film gave zero fucks about that, which is strange based on Loomis in the previous movie. In the sequel, Loomis is condescending and pretty damn selfish.
When I want your opinion, I'll beat it out of you. Here, now take that and go sit in the car. Go on, get your ass in there. Okay, hi, where do you want me?
He exploits the events of the first film to promote himself and be a true crime celebrity author. This tonal change in his character is totally unnecessary and offers no real payoff. Sure, he does seek to redeem himself, but only after several other characters point out how much of an ass he's been. There's failures, but this one is absolute dumpster juice. Oh yeah, and Michael talks. Ultimately, Rob Zombie shitting all over the established characters is what holds back both of his Halloween reboots. Let's get this right out of the way. Jackie Earle Haley is not the only reason why this movie flopped. And while I understand that Robert Englund and Freddy go together like flies and shit, Haley does a good job of giving a dark, menacing, and appropriately humorous take on Freddy.
Did you know that after the heart stops beating, the brain keeps functioning for well over 7 minutes? We got 6 more minutes to play.
Still, it's hard to ignore that fans couldn't see past this to appreciate the movie. Although this is jarring to many people, it's not the biggest flaw of the movie. One issue is trying to recreate classic moments from the 1984 movie. The CGI is fucking terrible, and you can't but help to compare it to the original. Not only that, the worst parts of the movie are the story and the main characters besides Freddy. Normally, when analyzing a horror movie, I would give them a pass for the acting.
Not today!
The Nancy in this movie doesn't have the same charisma about her as the Nancy in Wes Craven's story, and it really shows. She in no way convinces that the main story arc should have been focused on her. She doesn't come off as relatable, and while she doesn't carry the film on her own, she isn't given the supporting cast to help her do it. In the original, the rapport between Nancy and her parents to seem more believable, and a character like Donald Thompson was missing from the movie. Finally, the remake fails because it wastes time in trying to make Freddy a sympathetic figure. Part of the movie following Quentin as he tries to prove that Freddy was unjustly killed by the parents in the movie. It doesn't work because the audience clearly knows better. The movie does introduce cool concepts like the adrenaline and micro-naps, and even has great visuals in the dream sequences, but ultimately fails at what it's trying to do. Now earlier, I had mentioned that remakes fail because they retell the original and don't incorporate new elements well, or they'll butcher longtime favorites. There's actually another reason why the remakes tank.
It's us.
That's right, it's us, the fans.
Shut the fuck up!
Let me explain. Imagine going back to your old childhood neighborhood and noticing the renovations. New pavement, street lights, remodeled houses. Still the same neighborhood, but besides the outward appearance, just doesn't feel like how you remember it. Well, that's because technically it's not the same from a visual perspective, but more importantly, you've grown up. The same can be said by how, as the viewer, we see these reboots as a whole. No matter what current template we place on these remakes, it'll never capture the same viewing experience many had as younger fans. This is exactly what happened to the Friday the 13th remake. The initial poor reception for the movie was primarily based on misconceptions from self-proclaimed fans of the series. Case in point, many had cited that the characters were always bland and pretty generic, but throughout the series, except for maybe Part 4, that's always been the case. To expand on that, the biggest critique people took with the movie was that of how it handled Pamela and Jason Voorhees. In regards to Pamela, the problem with her was that the film didn't focus on her much, but in the original, she's not fully introduced until the final act. Of course, she's a major player in the series, but let's be real here. In 2009, there was no way you would get asses in the seats if you made a movie more centered on her. And finally, kinda goes without saying, but the bulk of the flack the movie gets is how Jason is presented. Let's also understand, this movie is placed in modern day, capturing elements from the first 4 movies. I have no idea how many so-called fans overlook this and complain that Jason never runs. By the end of the first 4 movies, this is exactly the way that he's designed. And as far as critiques in respect to him being resourceful, this is actually the writers expanding on the concept to do something new, and it works. The tunnels underground to explain why he's so timely in the original movies is much like the craftiness he had in Part 2. There are complaints that the remake humanized him, like Rob Zombie's Halloween, but again, this is exactly what happened in Part 2.
Jason, Mother is talking to you!
Jason, Mother is talking to you.
Derek Mears plays a great Jason, and probably the best since Part 4. It's pretty obvious the remake failed because fans like me, who grew up with the series, just didn't allow it to. By no means am I suggesting that all remakes are destined to fail. 2017's It is a great example of what a carefully crafted remake can look like that's well received by fans and critics. With the recent release of Child's Play, it gives optimism that maybe these 3 will be given another try at a retelling of the original. And as a fan, that's all I can really ask for. So what did you guys think? Do you agree? What other movies would you like to see remade? Discuss in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe.